Okay, so with millions of new documents dropping, the Jeffrey Epstein case has become this dizzying mix of hard facts, wild speculation, and, let's be honest, some pretty out-there conspiracy theories. So, in this explainer, we're going to try to cut through all that noise and look at what the actual evidence says about the biggest questions in this whole saga.
So let's just dive right in. Did he really take his own life? Was he some kind of intelligence asset with a get-out-of-jail-free card? Or was he running a massive global blackmail ring? We're going to look at what the official records and the investigations can actually tell us.
And we really have to start at the most fundamental place, right? What in the world happened inside that jail cell on August 10th, 2019?
I mean, just look at the official timeline. It is stark, and it moves incredibly fast. You've got his arrest, and then just weeks later, there's what appears to be a first suicide attempt. Days after that, a psychiatric evaluation says he's no longer an immediate risk, so they take him off the most intensive suicide watch. And then, less than 2 weeks later, he's dead.
You know, this wasn't just one slip-up. It was a total cascade of failures. A really damning report from the Justice Department in June 2023 laid it all out. We're talking about a complete, almost systematic breakdown. The cameras pointing at a cell? Broken. The guards? They fell asleep and then faked the logs to cover it up. He was also left with way more bed linens than he should have had, which is exactly what he allegedly used.
And this is where things get really contentious. The official city autopsy comes back and rules it as suicide. Case closed, right? Well, not exactly. A very well-respected pathologist named Dr. Michael Baden, who was hired by Epstein's own brother, found something different. He found 3 fractures in Epstein's neck that he says are extremely unusual for a hanging and are much more common in homicidal strangulation. Of course, the city's chief medical examiner completely rejected this and stood by the suicide ruling. So, you can see how this medical dispute just pours gasoline on the fire of the next major theory, that Epstein wasn't just some lucky criminal, but that he was actively being protected by some very powerful forces. To really get this, you have to rewind all the way back to 2007. Federal prosecutors down in Florida had built this absolutely massive case against him. I mean, they had a 53-page indictment ready to go, with nearly 60 charges, involving at least 11 victims. This could have easily put him in prison for life.
But he never faced that indictment. Not even close. Instead, he gets this infamous non-prosecution agreement. It just shut down the entire federal case. It gave him and his unnamed co-conspirators total federal immunity and let him plead to some minor state charges with a ridiculously light sentence.
So the question is, why? Why would prosecutors ever agree to a deal like that? Well, years later, a CNN report dropped a bombshell. An anonymous source claimed that the lead prosecutor, a guy named Alexander Acosta, told the Trump transition team that he was forced to cut that deal. Why? Because he was told that Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone.
Now, while that quote is absolutely explosive, we have to pump the brakes here for a second. It is so crucial to state that this is an unconfirmed, secondhand claim. There are no official documents, no testimony to back it up, and Acosta himself has gone under oath and flatly denied ever saying it.
And this pattern of, let's call it institutional failure, it went way beyond the legal system. For years, J.P. Morgan's own internal teams were flagging huge, super suspicious cash withdrawals from his accounts, but they kept him as a client. And when they finally did drop him, Deutsche Bank, another giant, just picked him right up as a client, even though he was already a registered sex offender. They eventually got hit with a $150 million fine for that.
So all this talk of protection, it builds right into the most sensational claims of all. Was this guy really a spy master? Was he running a massive blackmail operation targeting the global elite? Okay, so the core of this theory is pretty simple, right? The idea is that Epstein had hidden cameras absolutely everywhere, in all his mansions, on his island, and he used them to record his powerful guests, creating this giant library of compromat that would basically make him untouchable.
And look, several victims did report seeing hidden cameras, and the FBI seized a ton of media from his properties. But here's the reality check, at least for now. According to investigators, the material they've reviewed so far, it mostly shows Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and their young victims. They have not found what everyone expected, identifiable, powerful people caught in incriminating situations. The whole spy theory often hinges on his connections to figures like these. But when you really examine them, the evidence is pretty circumstantial. I mean, the link through Ghislaine's father, Robert Maxwell, it relies on these old, unproven claims from the 90s that he was a Mossad agent. The relationship with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak? Yeah, it involves business deals and lots of visits, but zero proof of any actual espionage has ever surfaced. And the meetings with the current CIA director, William Burns? They happened back when Burns was a diplomat, years before he was ever in an intelligence role.
And this all brings us to the final and maybe the most disturbing question of all. Was Epstein the head of a global trafficking ring that was basically servicing the world's elite? So after nearly 14 years of investigating, here's what the FBI found. They found a mountain of evidence of Epstein's own crimes. His personal criminal enterprise was just horrifyingly vast. But, and this is a big but, they found very little evidence that he was operating a trafficking network for other powerful men. They analyzed his finances and found no payments that would suggest he was running some kind of criminal service for others.
And this is maybe one of the most critical points, especially with all the documents coming out. We've all seen the famous names, right? Presidents, princes, celebrities, all mentioned in flight logs or emails. But what the documents actually show is that just because a name appears in a file, that does not mean they're guilty of a crime. Many mentions are for totally mundane reasons that have nothing to do with his criminal life.
Now, all this speculation has just been supercharged by this massive new document release. We're talking 3 million pages of evidence just dumped into the public domain.
But here's the kicker. As absolutely huge as that number is, it's still less than half the story. In total, authorities have collected over 6 million pages of documents related to this case.
And that right there is the crucial takeaway. While the evidence we have points to a suicide that was clouded by gross negligence and a criminal who was enabled by systemic failures, not some state-sponsored spy, the full truth is still locked away. It's in those millions of pages of sealed documents. And as long as they stay sealed, that gap between fact and theory is just going to keep on growing, leaving the Epstein case as one of the most enduring and frankly insoluble mysteries of our time.